Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do on this channel, but there's a good reason for it. Alright, so as some of you may know, I love animation, and I love creating animation and studying animation. And I believe I may have found the show with the greatest animation in all of Western cartoons. I want to start off with a little bit of backstory. So, for literally the longest time, I was only ever interested in animation when it came to anime and 2D animated movies like Disney films. I used to despise Western cartoons, with the exception of shows like Teen Titans and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, when I say I despise Western cartoons, I meant more along the lines of the animation and typical lack of a cohesive story. I liked watching shows like Ed, Edd n Eddy and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, but I didn't really appreciate Western cartoons as a whole up until a few years ago. With all that said, I now have a deep passion for following the works of Western cartoons, and more specifically, the story-driven ones we see today, along the lines of Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, and the topic of this video being Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I always knew I wanted to check out Star due to the interesting character designs when I would see promotional art for the show. However, I didn't get a chance to finally check it out up until a couple weeks ago. When I first started watching it, I was hooked. What immediately got my attention was the beautiful animation this show has to offer. Like, I'm serious, this is some next level stuff. Just look at the fluidity and overall bounciness of this intro. It's so amazing. I just finished binging this series, and I gotta tell you, I enjoyed every single second of it. This show has so much to offer, and at first glance you might think, oh, it's just some kids show on Disney XD. Well, you wanna know something? You're wrong. I'm going to start by telling you guys this show gets pretty dang dark for a Disney show. Like, I'm surprised they let half of the stuff on the air. For example, I'll start with the brilliant dialogue that is genuinely funny, with some relatively dark and adult humor. Take these two scenes, for example.
You're going down, Downer.
Oh yeah? Well, your mother's a horse.
Okay, and your point would be?
Ta-da! Awesome! What is it? We can do all kinds of witchy stuff with this thing.
Can we use it to get my parents to stop fighting?
Totally.
Give me that.
I lost it when I heard that. Now, the show's dark undertones stem past just the funny adult humor. Before I talk about my next point, I gotta let you guys know that there will pretty much be spoilers throughout the rest of this video. So if you have any interest at all in watching this show and don't want it spoiled for you, then I highly recommend you watch it as soon as possible and then come back to this video to fully understand the true points I want to make about this amazing show. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get back to the dark parts of the show. So in the Season 1 finale, we watch a highly anticipated fight between Star and Toffee. The fight ends with an explosion, and we see Toffee loses his arm, which serves as a massive plot point for the next 2 seasons, and his arm turns into another wand. Now, I know to a lot of people, losing an arm isn't that big of a deal when it comes to storytelling, but this completely shocked me because I didn't think Western cartoons on networks like Disney and Cartoon Network could be made in a way that tells a very deep and engaging story with actual character developments and loss. Like, people die in this show, and that's a wonderful storytelling technique that is so great to see used here. So far, this show has killed off more characters than the entirety of the popular anime being Fairy Tail. Now, speaking of character development, let's talk about the 3 characters that I feel have some of the most amazing development throughout the 3 seasons that are currently out so far. Those characters would be our main characters Star, Butterfly, and Marco Diaz, as well as a character introduced as sort of a comic relief villain being Ludo. Now, I know there are a lot of other characters who get an unreal amount of development as well, such as Queen Moon and Glossaric, but I have so much to say about the 3 I listed off earlier, and I don't want this video to drag out forever. Let's start with Star Butterfly. In the beginning of the show, we saw Star as a reckless, fun-loving, monster-hating girl. However, throughout the series, we see these traits drastically change. She goes from believing all monsters are evil and mean, to realizing that humans and monsters aren't so different, and that her initial feelings towards monsters stems from racial intolerance. So she then becomes the driving force for equal rights for all creatures. Also throughout the show, we see her slowly start to mature with each episode. She is now less reckless and knows what it means to be a leader. She is also trying her best to be the next queen that the people of Muni can count on and look up to. Next, let's talk about Marco Diaz, who has one of the most brilliant forms of character development I've ever seen. Marco starts off as a quote-unquote safe kid, which was initially the reason why he was chosen to look after Star after she came to Earth. However, we quickly learn that he can be kind of a badass. I mean, in the first episode, he fights off Ludo's army with ease, all because he's a green belt in karate. As the series goes on, we see Marco get stronger and stronger, and eventually we see one of the biggest plot twists ever when Marco is challenged by Hekapoo to gain his own pair of dimensional scissors. To do this, Marco must blow out all of the Hekapoo clones' flames from above their heads, which is a feat that takes 16 years to accomplish. And by the time he earns the scissors, Marco is in his late 30s and has learned a whole bunch of new skills and abilities. Luckily for us, time moves differently in Hekapoo's dimension, so Marco is still the scrawny kid we all know in every other dimension. However, ever since that point, he retains all of the stuff he learned in those 16 years for the rest of the series, from riding dragon cycles to the art of swordsmanship. It's truly a twist I didn't see coming, and the way this episode was presented was brilliant. In a sort of Rick and Morty-esque moment, when Marco returns to the current timeline, he doesn't remember his password since it's been 16 years, and everything just feels off and different. Overall, a brilliantly executed episode. Finally, we have Ludo, who is a character that gets an amazing amount of development throughout the series. As I said earlier, Ludo starts off as a comic relief villain with practically no redeeming qualities until after this first season. After Ludo loses everything, we see him crawl his way back up to the top during his own set of episodes. We see his struggles with taming a hostile spider and an eagle, and eventually an entire rat army. Ludo eventually goes from being a comic relief punching bag to being a serious antagonist throughout the second and third season. Sure, he had quite a bit of help from the wand that had Toffee's spirit still inside of it, but Ludo was still the one who was able to take the Book of Spells from Star, and eventually went on to kill Glossaryck for a short period of time. Needless to say, this show's ability to have so much character development for so many of its characters in such a short amount of time is truly amazing. And even without a ton of development, there are still a lot of really likable characters in this show, one of my favorites being Eclipsa, who really shined during the single episode where her and Queen Moon found out that the Butterfly royal family's past has been tampered with by the High Commission. Seriously, I could go on and on about this show for a very long time. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the amazing songs. I mean, sure, there aren't that many, and while I love the intro in both the Earth and Battle for Mutiny endings, I just really hate the fact that they're so short and there's no extended version. But I digress. This show has the ability to evoke a pure sense of inspiration. It's a show that just makes you feel good when you watch it. With its hilarious jokes, brilliant animation, and a wonderful cast of characters, I highly recommend Star vs. the Forces of Evil to anyone. Now we just have to wait until Season 4 comes out, which allegedly the final season. Which I would be okay with that. I feel as though Star really only needs one more season to just tie up all the loose ends, and really say all it needs to say. Overall, it's just so amazing to see all these new Western cartoons adding in-depth stories and compelling characters. I mean, just look at the promotional art for the new show, The Owl House. I mean, it looks really interesting, and hopefully it continues the trend of having amazing animation and a wonderful story just like Star did before it. It's shows like these that make me really want to create my own animated series sometime in the near future. One day I plan on owning my own animation studio and producing shows like this that can truly evoke inspiration in the people watching it, with even more creative freedom and no censorship whatsoever, but that's a video for another time. What do you guys think about Star vs. the Forces of Evil? And did you guys like that I talked about a cartoon show in this video instead of video games? If so, let me know, and maybe I'll do more videos on anime and cartoons in the future, as well as my videos on video games as well. Well, that's all for now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.